Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you again. This week we do Within Temptation's Mother Earth at your suggestion, Chris. I have to say I'm looking forward to this. How are you, bud?
Very good. And yourself?
Not too bad. Not too bad. We want to thank everyone for listening to last week's episode. Kind of a tribute episode, if you will, to Alexei Leho, who unfortunately passed away earlier this month, and we felt it was fitting to do a Children of Bodom episode in light of his untimely passing. So we thank you for joining us, and now we will give you the episode that we promised. Before we do, I want to tell you a little bit of a funny story that something that happened. A buddy of mine, and this is a true story, a buddy of mine had asked me if I had heard the newest album by a band called Eshtador. And I had said I'd never heard the new album. I've never heard of the band. So I went to check it out earlier today. And they are a Colombian, I guess we'll call them a melodic death metal band, bordering on a little bit of black metal. I had never heard anything by them before, but they had a new album that had come out, I guess it was in September. And the album was called From the Abyss. So I popped it on and I just wanted to check it out. And as I'm listening to this, it sounds like really, good quality melodic death metal and an album that I could really kind of sink my teeth into. I thought the production was good. The guitar work was good, etc. And the tracks, there's about 10 tracks on the album. And I get halfway through the disc and I'm enjoying myself. And then all of a sudden I get to track number 6 and it's called All She Wrote. And all of a sudden, I hear the familiar sound of someone who's definitely not a death metal singer. And I'm saying to myself, I know this voice. And I quickly realized that it is Zaher Zaghari from Mirath, a band that I know we're both pretty big fans of. And I was saying to myself, you go from this melodic death metal to this, I don't even want to call it power metal, but this like melodic rock song in the middle of this album. And it was like the weirdest twist. I'll post this for everyone to hear it because I thought it was really, really well done. And after this track, the album goes right back to the melodic death metal. It's kind of trippy. And I have to say, if I spent more time with the album, it may have cracked the top 50. I just, obviously I only got to listen to it once today, but it's definitely worth hearing. And to hear Mirath's vocalist on this album of all things, I think you're gonna enjoy it quite a bit.
Cool. Yeah, I would definitely like to give that a listen.
Yeah, it's different, and I'll post 2 tracks just so you can kind of see what the contrast is between the two. And one other album that I just wanted to mention that I kind of checked out earlier this week, another album from 2020. It's a band called Fleetburner. It has an American vocalist by the name of Ken Simmerly, a guy I admittedly had never heard of. But the lineup is a bunch of guys from different bands. And when I say that, you have a guy who used to be in Flames and Sierra by the name of Peter Iwers. The drummer used to be in a band called Mister. The keyboard player is from Kalma. And the guitar player was with a band called Equilibrium. And this album features a number of guest vocalists that kind of run the gamut. So I won't even get into that now just because I won't, it's a little bit too much to get into. But the band had just a really unique sound, and it was like a progressive rock, progressive metal hybrid, depending on what song it was. And it had like this mix between Catatonia and Anathema with like U2 and the Gin Blossoms. I've never heard anything like it. And I'm still not even sure if I loved it or if I just merely liked it, but it was different and also worth checking out. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. We'll put that up on our social media sites throughout the week. And it's definitely worth a listen. But with that, let's get to the reason why we are here. Mother Earth from Within Temptation. When did you first hear this album?
It's a little hazy. I didn't hear it upon its initial release. It came out originally at the very end of 2000 in the Netherlands, which is where the band is from. And so it just recently is celebrating its 20th anniversary, which is kind of what gave me the idea, which I believe one of us probably would have picked this early on anyway. So, but I guess that kind of just set the wheels in motion for me to choose it now. I know the band got on my radar while I was in college. So I would probably say somewhere in like 2001, 2002, and it probably was either Mother Earth or Ice Queen were the first two Within Temptation songs I ever heard, and I remember checking out the music videos for both of those songs, and it wasn't until years later that I really heard the rest of the album. Like Within Temptation was always just kind of on my radar a little bit, but it would be the years later, probably like 08, 09, that I became a really big fan of the band and went back and re-listened to this album all the way through and realized how much I really like it. How about you?
It's interesting. This album, as you said, comes out in late 2000. It's not their first release. They had come out with an album 3 years prior called Enter. And I have to admit, I don't know how much of a listen I gave that album. Or I should say, it's been a while, to say the least. I don't know if I ever gave it its full due. I first heard this album around 2001, 2002. How I heard it is a little bit of a story. I had heard of the band, but the album was not released in the US for many, many years later. I think until about 2008, if I'm not mistaken. But this album, was available in Europe, but I had never heard the band. I had just heard of the band. So I was using Napster and I downloaded the entire album, and I will admit this now, 20 years later, having since purchased it. I downloaded the entire album. I remember burning it onto CD, and I figured I would give it a listen. And I didn't really know what to expect. I knew that they had Sharon Denadel as the singer, who I was, let's just say, familiar with just because of her work with Avantasia. That's really, I think, where I first heard her sing on the Metal Opera Part 1, where she sings probably one of my favorite songs, Farewell, a ballad with Michael Kiske from Helloween. And that song put me on to her, which ultimately led me to the Napster download. And at first, and quite frankly, for a while, I played the hell out of this album. I guess I was definitely attracted to the two songs that you mentioned, the title track and Ice Queen. And I definitely think that those at the time were the two best songs on the album by a country mile. But I played this album constantly because I had never heard anything like it at the time. Obviously, we've talked about Nightwish. This does not sound like Nightwish. And I think the closest comparison that I would probably make is like The Gathering, maybe. I'm not even sure what you would compare it to because it has such a unique feel, not only at the time, but even in their own discography.
Yeah, I have to agree. Hindsight being 2020, and now that the band has, released several albums, it's become pretty apparent that they're not really looking to kind of stick to just one style and stay that way. And I think that this was the first album where they were kind of making that clear, because the first album, Enter, was kind of dark. You might even call it like doomy in a lot of ways.
I agree.
It's a totally different sound than what they did on Mother Earth, and subsequent albums after Mother Earth weren't really very much like Mother Earth either. So I think that, this was kind of their way of saying, like, you never know what you're going to get when we come out with an album. It's going to be good, but it might not sound, like the last album. I mean, if you compare Within Temptation's most recent release to this, I mean, it's almost like two different bands that just happen to have the same singer.
Yeah, especially the most recent album and even Hydra going back one before that. So the most recent album is called Resist. It came out in 2019. The previous effort came out 5 years before that. It was called Hydra in 2014. And I would argue that even going back to The Unforgiving in 2011, that those three albums, that trilogy, if you will, sounds far and away different from anything before it. And I really think The Unforgiving was a turning point for them. although I agree, all their albums sound different from one another. But I think they went with a really more of a poppier, trying to almost like a radio friendly vibe. And I really get that Evanescence vibe, back from when that first album in 2003, Fallen. It's interesting. They are actually scheduled to go out on tour together, Evanescence and Within Temptation, but I know it's been postponed and rescheduled due to the pandemic and whatnot. But the reason I bring that up is I remember when I first heard Evanescence on the radio back in 2003, thinking to myself, Within Temptation should be on the radio, and songs like Ice Queen would fit perfectly as a complement to, some of the hit singles from that album, which sold millions upon millions of records.
Well, there's only room on the radio for one symphonic metal band at a time in the United States.
I guess so. And here we are 20 years later, and unfortunately, we're still there. But it just struck me as very, very interesting that this band at the time didn't really hit it. I guess, in my opinion, they really took off after The Heart of Everything. Not that it's my favorite album, but I think that was the album that kind of just put them on the map, and it coincides with when you kind of fell in love with them, I guess, right after 2007.
Right. And now that you mentioned the whole Avantasia connection, that's definitely where I first heard, because I remember looking at that lineup of musicians and thinking to myself, like, she's one of the only ones I don't recognize that's on this list. And at the time, I guess Mother Earth would have just been released. So, I had become familiar with them the same way you had. I mean, it was even years later past that I even went back and listened to Enter for the first time and realized how totally different they sounded on their at the beginning of their existence as a band. So it's hard to say that this album kind of like set the tone for what Within Temptation was going to be going forward. I think that their next two albums after this are kind of in the same vein, maybe not as I don't know exactly how to put it per se, but they're definitely a little bit more polished production wise. Mother Earth, sure. you could tell is still kind of a raw sounding album, at least as far as like a symphonic metal album goes. There's definitely Celtic influences. I think there's definitely like some very atmospheric ballad type songs on here. Even just the album itself has a lot of different types of songs. I feel like it really has a cool kind of like wave that it takes you to. Like, it starts out right away with like a heavy song, but then you have songs like, Our Farewell and The Promise and In Perfect Harmony and Never Ending Story that are more on the softer side, a little bit more of a ballad type song. But then, on the other side, all the other tracks are like really kind of like heavy symphonic tracks like Deceiver of Fools and Dark Wings and Mother Earth. So that, I think, is definitely something that Within Temptations continued on going forward, as far as, having really beautiful ballad, atmospheric type songs while also having these really bombastic symphonic, like heavy metal tracks as well.
Yeah, the contrast here is one of the things I think I noticed on the playback. I happen to know the album very well just because I said I played the hell out of it when I first downloaded it, and really never stopped through the years. What I think struck me more than anything is that there were, being that it's been some time since I have listened to it, there were certain tracks that really stuck out to me this time around that I didn't pay as much mind to, I guess, back in the day. And I'm not really sure if it's just because taste changed or because I was kind of, like I said, I kind of viewed this as a 3-song album with other cool tracks that backed it up. I always thought it was Mother Earth, Ice Queen, and Deceiver of Fools. Not surprisingly. I think that most people would probably say that. But it was this time around where other songs, such as The Promise and Dark Wings, really stood out because I guess I just haven't played them as much as these other tracks, and I loved it. And songs like The Caged may be one of their most underrated songs in their entire catalog.
Yeah, for sure. the three songs that you mentioned initially were probably like the staples of live tracks that they play from this album. I think nowadays it might only just be Mother Earth. I don't know that they play much from this album anymore, but if you go back and you watch their Black Symphony Blu-ray, which to this day is one of the most impressive concert Blu-ray or DVDs that I've ever seen.
I remember watching that at your place years ago when it first came out, and just remarking it's fantastic. It's probably my favorite live DVD Blu-ray release ever. I think it's that good, and I would put it up against anything. The quality of that production is second to none. But even then, like you said, they were only playing a couple of tracks off of this album, and it seems like for the longest time, at most you would get the three tracks that I mentioned earlier. Now you're lucky to get one or two, just because with all the new material, they seem to have phased it out. But the irony is that they seem to always close with either Mother Earth or Ice Queen. So I guess there's something to be said for that always being the encore.
Well, I think that those two songs definitely represent the point in time where the band really kind of became, really hit it, I guess, like where they became, a well-known band, maybe more so overseas than here in the US. I mean, sure. They've become quite a popular band here. As far as bands that we discuss, they're probably one of the more popular bands we've discussed so far. But yeah, those songs, like they were big hits on TV, on the whatever the European versions of MTV would be, whatever. I believe there was a Dutch music channel called The Box, because I remember downloading the music video for Mother Earth and or Ice Queen and seeing that logo in the corner for The Box, and remember thinking to myself, what the hell is The Box? Realizing that, not only would it become a nickname that our friend Pat would give us, but it was also an MTV style channel in the Netherlands. It got a lot of play, those two tracks and those two music videos. So
it's funny you mentioned it. I could be wrong here, but I actually remember The Box when I first got cable here in the States. If I'm not mistaken, you could actually call up the channel at the time, and I could be way off base. And if I'm wrong, give me a shout out. But if I'm not mistaken, The Box was actually like a service that we actually had here in America at some point. I have memories of this station where you could literally pay money. I guess it was attached to a credit card or something like that. And you could request a video to be played on the channel, almost like a jukebox where you put the money in and you request a particular song. Well, here you'd actually request the music video. And the problem was that if you requested a song now, you had no idea when it would actually show up on the TV. It wasn't instantaneous because you had to wait for everybody else in the queue to have their videos played. So I never understood why it worked. And I guess that's why eventually they went under. But I'm assuming that this is what they were doing in the Netherlands with the Within Temptation videos.
Yeah, that makes sense because I remember watching that video that I downloaded, and there was like, what do you call it? Like when you see the sports scores on the bottom of the screen on ESPN, a ticker, I guess.
A ticker or a sports ticker with the scores.
Yeah. So there'd be a ticker like saying like, vote for this. And it would be funny because it'd be like some like mainstream song and then like Mother Earth would be playing in the background. But
exactly.
Listen, hey, The Box would still exist if Mike was aware of it. He'd still be sending the money to request videos. So I mean,
single-handedly keeping them in business, of course.
Yeah. So if they had just reached out to him by then, so yeah, going back to that, I think it's because those songs kind of represent where the band kind of, started gaining some traction and popularity. To me, especially like Mother Earth is kind of like, at least for me personally, it's the song that really got me into the band, and it's also the song that I think got a lot of people into the band. So,
and the crowd still pops like crazy when they play it. We talked about a little bit about their live show, and we talked a little bit about like the set list. I just want to give you a little bit of perspective. When I first saw them live, it was May of 2007, and they played the Gramercy Theater here in New York, which is kind of like a popular spot for, bands that may not be the biggest bands that are touring. I believe it holds about 600 people or something like that. And Within Temptation was the direct support for Lacuna Coil. And, nothing against Lacuna Coil. I happen to enjoy their music, but Lacuna Coil headlined, and Within Temptation played an 8-song set that night. And this was during the Heart of Everything tour. And as we discussed, they played Mother Earth and Ice Queen to end the show. And it was fantastic. But as I've since seen them in sold out venues in New York City of 3,000 people, they have clearly blown up in terms of popularity. And the irony is that Lacuna Coil is still playing the Gramercy Theater when they come to town. So they really have gained a tremendous amount of success over the last, I'd say, 12 to 15 years.
Absolutely. I think I've seen them twice now, both times at what was the name of the venue in New York City?
Terminal 5.
Yeah, Terminal 5.
It holds about 3,000 people.
Yeah, and both
theaters played there.
And both times it was like jam-packed with people, multiple floors. The first time I saw them, I believe it was during the Unforgiving tour, and when they played what was it, Deceiver of Fools, I had like an emotional moment. I'll never forget. I was in the back of the room on the first floor, standing next to the bar with Caleb and Mike, and they just started playing the song, and I was just like, I had a few drinks, and it was kind of like that perfect concert buzz, and like I just like started crying. I was like I don't know why. Maybe I didn't think they were going to play it, or it was just it was so powerful hearing it live. But I just remember
I remember that, and because I didn't expect them to play it, because it was almost they had phased it out, and they're kind of a static live band, and by that I mean the set lists don't change from show to show. They change a little from tour to tour, but for the most part they play the same thing every time you see them. And if you see multiple shows on the tour, you're not getting new songs. So that was a real surprise to me, because I had never seen that song live. It was the biggest treat, from that entire concert.
Yeah, and I don't think that they've been playing it since that tour. So
no.
Kind of glad that we were able to catch that.
Actually,
I will say I picked this up one year in the vendor room at Prague Power, but I believe it was only released overseas. But they released a box set of DVD and a couple of CDs of it's called the Mother Earth Tour. And if you want to see just kind of like what the band was doing live after this album came out, and you want to hear pretty much every song from this album, you definitely want to check out that live album and DVD, and you'll hear pretty much the whole album plus a handful of tracks from the Enter album and the Dance EP that came out shortly thereafter. It's really cool. I'm glad I bought it, because as a huge fan of the Mother Earth album, it was cool to be able to see a lot of these songs performed live, like, The Promise and Neverending Story and Caged and things of that nature. So if you could get your hands on it, I definitely recommend it.
I've never seen it. I have to check that out. I think it's pretty rare, just because it's not something that you see all over the place.
Yeah, I believe they did one as well for the Silent Force. I believe they came out with a DVD called the Silent Force Tour, and it was very similar. It was like a DVD and 2 CD set with the songs that they played during that tour. Yeah, they've always been good about releasing live material, like, officially over the years. So yeah, those I believe both of those releases were European and Japanese only. That I don't think they were ever made available in the US. I don't even know if you'd be able to find them on Spotify or iTunes. I'm not 100% sure. But I definitely made sure to get my hands on both of those, because for me, I want to have everything that this band's ever done. Like, they're one of my favorite bands, and kind of circling back, like, this album kind of is where it all started for me. I mean, even now, like, I don't really go back and listen to enter all that much. It's a little too raw. It's a little too like, it's just not the kind of style that I've come to want to hear from Within Temptation. But Mother Earth, like always, just every time I hear it, I have to say I was a little surprised. I listened to it earlier today. I was a little surprised that I remember it being longer. I guess it's a kind of a, maybe it just goes quickly because it's so good, but it felt short to me.
Yeah, and maybe it's just because of the way it flows, or maybe it's because it's just I don't know, a little different from all their other stuff. So it's always nice to revisit it. So it's like it moves a little bit faster. It's been re-released a number of times, and if you just don't listen to the bonus tracks, which is essentially live material and one or two B-sides, the 10 tracks themselves, it moves pretty fast. The only knock on it I have is that it's just a little bit too ballady, in the sense that there's really like 4 or 5 ballads on here out of a 10. It's every other song is a ballad for all intents and purposes. And while I enjoy them and I love Sharon's voice over the keyboard and the piano and whatnot, it's a little too samey for me in that sense. Still a great album, but that's my one knock if I had to give one.
I probably at some point in time felt the same way. I don't know that I do anymore, just because to me, like these like all the songs of this album have just become so classic to me. Because I mean, they're 20 years old now, but I mean, I've heard them so many times, and I think of, I want to say on the Black Symphony, and you feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I'm kind of going off the top of my head here, but I think that that Sharon does a duet with Anneke. Do they do The Promise as a duet?
That I believe that's right. I'm trying to think back. I think that is right, though. That does sound familiar, right? Yes.
And that that version of that, yeah. And I just confirmed it with a quick Google search. And we'll definitely post that during the week, because that's definitely worth seeing. 2 of the greatest symphonic metal vocalists duet a beautiful song. So I was thinking of that when I heard the song today. Yeah, I like, it's pretty much like a half ballad album, but the songs are so beautifully done that it's really hard to really complain. Like I've grown to really love songs like Our Farewell and Imperfect Harmony and Never Ending Story and The Promise. Like,
oh, they're great songs. Don't get me wrong. I don't want that to be like a big knock on the album. It was a little samey, although each one in its own right holds up exceptionally well. I hope I make that clear. Where does Mother Earth, I guess, fall for you in terms of like the overall discography? Because it is so different. Is this your favorite Within Temptation album, or has something else kind of eclipsed this over the years?
It's between this and The Unforgiving for me. I'm a big fan of The Unforgiving. I know a lot of people kind of knock on how they kind of started to stray a little bit from the classic sound, but I really liked what they were doing with that album. I think that it's like super heavy, but yet like has those hooks that really make it also very catchy as well. I feel like Silent Force and Heart of Everything like also kind of also can be like kind of over ballady, maybe like you said about Mother Earth. I feel like The Unforgiving, they just were like, all right, we're gonna make like a full on rock album. But yeah, those would probably be my 2 favorites. I always found that like Hydra, I enjoyed it, but I found it to be very uneven. I thought that the tracks that they did with the 4 special guests were the highlight of the album, but then like the other tracks were kind of, I guess, yeah, a little lacking for me. I thought Resist was a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for? Even. I enjoyed it, but it's definitely showing that the band is moving in more of a I don't know if radio friendly is the right way of putting it, but definitely kind of a more pop oriented sound mixed with that, symphonic metal.
They came out with a single for 2 songs last year. I'm assuming it's on their album that's coming out next year. If you listen to a song like "Entertain You," they're moving in a different direction. There's no question about it. For me, this was always number one, or we'll say 1A, and the Silent Force 1B. And it's not too surprising because it's really when I got into the band, and that kind of like sets the stage for everything else that comes after it. When you often hear something, you hold everything else to that level. So on any given day, either this or Silent Force will become, like my favorite. If gun to my head, I think Silent Force is one step above this, but that's just because it was better produced, a little more diversity in the songs, although obviously there are a number of ballads on there as well. But like I said, this album holds up exceptionally well. And I guess with that, I'll ask you, what is your track of the week for this album? I think you could go in a number of different directions, and I'm kind of curious to see where you go.
Yeah, this is hard for me because like going into it, I thought for sure it was going to be Deceiver of Fools, just because I think that song is so epic. I had an emotional moment seeing it live. It's really, really cool to see on the Black Symphony concert, done with like this full orchestra. It's definitely very goosebump inducing for sure. And it's one of my all time favorite songs, but I was also reminded that another one of my all time favorite songs is Dark Wings. And I think depending on the day, I could go one way or the other, but today I'm going with Dark Wings. I think it's just a fantastic, just like a high tempo, awesome, just a really awesome symphonic metal song. And something that I learned today that I did not know, or maybe just forgot, is that Aron Lucassen from Ayreon does the guitar solo in that song, which I don't think I ever knew. So that's kind of cool too.
I had no idea about that. That surprised me as well. I thought you were going to say Deceiver of Fools just because of the moment, if you will, that you had with the song. I was going to select Dark Wings as kind of a dark horse because I just fell in love with it more than ever this time around, having not heard it forever. So I'm glad you chose it, because had I not chosen it, at least you did. But now it forces me to really kind of go in a different direction. And I guess just because, how do you not pick either Mother Earth or Ice Queen just because it's their two most iconic songs, arguably? Which one? Flip a coin. I'm going to go with Ice Queen, but I think you could easily go with Mother Earth. Both of them are just outstanding genre-defining songs. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that they've even had songs that were as good since, despite having albums, at least in my opinion, like the Heart of Everything, where it's just, or I should say the Silent Force, and even to the Heart of Everything to a lesser extent, but just maybe more complete albums. But those two songs are the barometer by which I judge this band. So I'll go Ice Queen, even though I think that you could make a case for a number of songs on the disc.
That's cool. I'm gonna see if I can find a version of the music video with that was on the box with the ticker on the bottom. I just think that would be kind of like a fun blast from the past.
Nice. You got to post that just because, especially if you can find the box version, just because it's it goes with right what we discussed today.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. I think back then I probably used some sort of peer-to-peer. I know Napster didn't let you download videos initially, and then they did later on. But I remembered in college having like high speed internet for the first time and downloading like full music videos and watching full music videos. And I don't know, I might still have it on my computer somewhere, but I have to see if that same version is somewhere on YouTube or somewhere out there. Cause it would just be kind of neat to see that, especially considering that we discussed it a little bit today. So,
and I'll say this, just one more thing that I think I want to talk about before I have you rate the album. Within Temptation's lineup has stayed pretty consistent over the years for the most part, except that the keyboard player on this album, Martin Westerholt, is no longer with the band. He left the band, and he's actually the brother of the guitar player who is the husband of Sharon Den Adel, the singer. It's kind of an interesting relationship. But Martin, who plays keyboards on this album, he went on to leave the band in 2001, and I believe he formed another band that you're familiar with.
Yeah, so the story was that he developed mono and was forced to leave Within Temptation because of he was ill, and after he recovered, the band had brought in somebody else to play keyboards, and so he decided to start his own little. I think initially, I don't think it was even meant to be a full-time band. It was just this little project that he had, and he had Sharon come in and do a track, and he had Liv Christine from Leaves' Eyes came in and did a track, and Marco from Nightwish came in and did a couple of tracks, but he decided to go with an unknown female vocalist to do the lead vocal duties on this album, and that female vocalist was Charlotte Wessels, and that album turned into Delane's Lucidity album, and it was released in 2006, and it was received so well that it became a full-time outfit and continues to this day, where
and he remains with them and
he remains with them. Yeah,
writing a lot of their songs.
Yeah, he's been there from the beginning. But yeah, him and his brother Robert were founding members of Within Temptation. And Robert is I'm pretty sure he's still a songwriting entity in the band, but I don't believe he tours with them anymore. I believe he retired from touring with the band.
Yeah, I heard that as well. I cannot confirm that, but the band actually has 3 guitar players. He does do the songwriting and the lyrics along with Sharon, but I believe that Stefan and Ruud actually do the guitar work on tour. I think he's no longer touring. I think that's right.
Yep, and it also should be noted too that Sharon did not do any of the songwriting on this album. She wrote the lyrics. But all of the music was written by Robert Westerholt, with the exception of a few, like classical songs that were, borrowed within certain tracks. But it wasn't until I believe on Enter, she may have had some songwriting credits, and on Silent Force she most certainly does. But she didn't have any of songwriting credits on this album. This was all Robert.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I guess that as time goes on, she obviously takes a much more active role in the songwriting. What is this for you? Is this a 10, or is it just really, really close? Because I know you're going to rate it exceptionally high, and I don't blame you.
Yeah, I don't know that it's perfect. I don't know that I would give it a 10. 10 to me is like kind of rarefied air, but it's pretty darn close. Listening to it again, I kind of wish there was like 1 or 2 more tracks, in all honesty. Like I felt like I wanted the experience to continue. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty close. I would definitely put it right at 9.5.
Yeah. It's funny. And maybe it's just because it's been a while or what have you. I forgot how great this album was. I knew it, and obviously it's something that I listened to a lot in the past. But just with all the stuff that's been coming out the last bunch of years, I had kind of put this aside for a bit. This is a 9 for me, and like I said, if I'll put it to you this way, I've yet to find a symphonic metal band that in this type of genre, I guess, that eclipses this album and the Silent Force. They're neck and neck, and it's as good as it gets. They really, I think, hit home runs with those albums, and this is a 9 for me, and it's quite frankly, we go back to the best of 2020 episode. I had a lot of symphonic metal bands in there, and I don't think they exist without Within Temptation, just because of the impact that they've had on that genre.
Yeah, and this album particularly, I think, really opened the door for this style. Because I mean, other than Nightwish, I don't know that I was familiar with very many even female fronted metal bands at all at that point in time.
I mean, like I said, the comp I used was The Gathering, but I wasn't listening to The Gathering in 2001. I wasn't. And I only found out about them after the fact, even though they precede them in terms of just when they started.
Right. And I would even argue that The Gathering wasn't really like this grandiose symphonic metal type band. They kind of were more a little bit kind of like doomy and gloomy.
That's fair. I think that's fair. I think the influence is there, especially on Enter, but a little bit so on this album. I think they moved away from it considerably with the Silent Force and everything afterwards. But there's a touch of it here to my ears. But I'm sure that not everyone would agree with that.
Right, and and this is an album, just to put in perspective, that came out around the same time as, or probably a little bit after Nightwish's Wishmaster album, and I have to say, like, they definitely went with their own sound. They didn't try to be a Nightwish clone or anything like that. The vocals are very different. Sharon just has a much like more of a willowy, like cleaner vocal. Not, she doesn't really do like a straight up opera style vocal. And I think that that's another reason why it stood out, is that it didn't sound like they were trying to be somebody else. They were really carving their own niche in the genre, which, like you said, like so many bands have gone on to copy what they do. I believe I even mentioned in the best of 2020 episode that I think I was saying that I thought Beyond the Black was kind of headed in the same direction that current Within Temptation is going. So I mean, even their newer stuff, I think, is influencing other bands. But I mean, to me, like, this album is definitely a real classic, a legendary album in my opinion. It was really great to go back and listen to it. It had been a while since I listened to it start to finish, and now I kind of want to go and watch all those live DVDs. And I love, like I said, I love that Mother Earth Live DVD where you get to see pretty much the whole album performed. And if you can get your hand, I'm sure they're probably all on YouTube. I'm pretty sure Black Symphony is on YouTube as well. And I'll definitely post that version of The Promise with Anneke. But they also play Deceiver of Fools, Ice Queen, and Mother Earth with that huge orchestra as well. So definitely worth checking out those two DVD releases, or even just the audio formats.
Yep. So there you have it. There is Mother Earth from Within Temptation. A fantastic choice, I have to say. I'm glad we went back down there. I believe it's my turn to pick something for next week, right? So I was giving this a lot of thought, and I was thinking about, we've talked off air a lot about the Night Flight Orchestra, and we've talked a lot about At the Movies, which is a project involving Bjorn Streed from Soilwork. And I said to myself, we haven't done any melodic death metal on this show, and I think that's going to change. I want to do not just a melodic death metal album. I want to do the first melodic death metal album I've ever heard. And this goes way, way back to 2003, 2004, when I heard Soilwork's Figure Number 5. So I think that's what we're going to do next week, just because I know how much of a fan of Bjorn's you are. And I know that the vocals on figure number 5 are markedly different than that on the Night Flight Orchestra and a lot of his work recently. So I don't even know if you've heard this album, at least in its entirety, but you're going to, because that's what we're talking about next week.
Yeah, I'm familiar with like a handful of tracks, mostly Overload, but the album on a whole I am not that familiar with. I definitely remember Rejection Roll as well. I believe that was maybe the first Soilwork song I ever heard, which would probably make it the first melodic death metal song I ever heard as well. But yeah, I definitely look forward to this. This is definitely a band that I would not have liked when I was younger, that I've really grown to appreciate now that my tastes and my palette for different types of music has expanded. So I definitely look forward to giving it a good listen and then talking to you about it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. This is an album. Like I said, this was my first exposure to that kind of music, and it kind of just opened up Pandora's box from there. But it never hurts to go back to the roots. So next week, figure number 5 by Soilwork. And with that, enjoy your week. And you can go back and listen to or watch some of those Blu-rays from Within Temptation, as I have a feeling that's what you're going to be doing this weekend. And nothing but the best. If you like what you heard, obviously, leave us a review, give us a follow. It really does help other people find the show. We're happy with the audience, which has been increasing every week. But by the same token, we would be nothing without your support. So give us a like and a follow and a shout out, and we'll come back to you next week with figure number 5.
Yeah, I checked the iTunes store earlier today, and it looks like we do have 3 5-star reviews. Unfortunately, we don't have enough reviews yet where we could actually see I believe at a certain point we'll be able to read what is being posted, and when that time comes, we will definitely read anything that any comments that are left or reviews. We'll read them on the air, provided that they're not like just lambasting us for being terrible.
Yeah, and if they are, maybe we'll just do that for comedic effect. We'll figure that out when the time comes. But we know you're out there. We just ask you that you leave us a review, because it certainly helps other people find the show.
Right, yeah, for sure. So for the people that have left us a review and rating, we just want to say thanks, and we definitely plan on continuing this for the foreseeable future, for sure.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to it. So with that, we will see you next week. Have a good one, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care, bud.